The third row just towards the back. Test. Can you hear me? Because then, do we need it there? Okay. Test. Test. Okay. Okay, everyone, we're going to get started at 6:45. So if everyone can actually come over to these first 3 rows right here, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
So, just so you know, this is on, off. This is the mic for here. This is a live stream one. So just kind of like clip on one of them, and I'll capture both.
Okay.
Right. And just turn it on whenever you're ready.
Okay.
And then we'll plug your laptop.
Goes down a little bit.
Oh, you can just put both.
Yeah, let me just.
I try connecting them together.
I'll be fine. Yeah. Good. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Good evening, everybody. And first and foremost, I want to thank Harshdeep Singh and Rajkor for organizing the event, and then also Ohlone College and Lynn Center for hosting us. I was asked to share briefly about my research on history of Sikhs in California and the United States. But before I do that, I also want to share a little bit about how I ended up in the PhD program over at UC Riverside and what really led me to pursue a PhD focusing on the history of Sikhs in the United States and the Sikh diaspora more broadly speaking. Initially, I wanted to pursue a career in the legal field and become a lawyer. I received multiple admissions as well into law school, but I had applied to one PhD program, and that was to UC Riverside because of a professor that I knew in the history department over there, who focused on Japanese American history in the United States. The conversation started in Stockton during a conference we had in 2016, really focusing on it. It was a national conference that was to take place in Stockton, focusing on Asian American history, and they asked me to present on the history of Stockton Gurdwara and discuss the significance of Sikh American history in Stockton and the significance of Stockton Gurdwara to Asian American history, broadly speaking. When I started thinking more about, I've always been interested in history, however, I never thought about pursuing a career in terms of history and pursuing a PhD. You know, as we grew up, we only hear about the major fields within our community. That's law, doctor, engineer, and so on, right? Just top 3 or top 4 fields. But then the conversation really started that in order to really make a mark in terms of our community and have our community voice be out there in relation to these other voices in Asian American history or in American history, we need to be setting up scholars in various fields. And that was ultimately the reason why I wanted to pursue a PhD, and ultimately led me to choose a PhD over law. And it's over the years in my PhD program, it's been 6 years now, I've had the opportunity to share the Sikh narrative through many different avenues, whether it's looking at the Kisan Morcha in 2020 or the present. We know what the broader narratives and how the Indian narrative really spins these narratives, and because they have people in places of power, and they have individuals who are professors at various universities who are at research institutions and can really write those narratives. And even in the PhD program, there were many people who told me, when we talk about the Sikh narrative, we have to be aware of what the Indian government is talking about, and we have to be mindful of that as well. And even more specifically in the field of Sikh studies, there's a lot of professors and a lot of individuals who don't really bring what I would call the Sikh narrative. They bring a different narrative that is a little bit aligned with, either they will completely ignore the grassroots movement or the Khalistan narrative. For example, the first conference that I attended for Sikh studies was back in 2017. And when I attended this conference, there was an entire panel dedicated on speaking about the Gadar Leher, which I'll talk a little bit about more in detail later. But when they were talking about the Gadar Leher, they were really celebrating these activists from 100 years ago and talking about their legacies and the work that they've done for a sovereign state. And in the back of the room, I raised my hand to ask the panelists a question that, we're celebrating these these heroes and the shaheeds from 100 years ago, how come as scholars we're hesitant to talk about the shaheeds from just 35, 40 years ago, these present shaheeds? And it was at that moment I realized that was not the space to be talking about it, because everyone in the room, a room full of Sikh scholars, turned around and looked at me as if I was crazy. Why would I pose such a question? So that is the reason why I thought it's important for us to be in places of higher education and really pursue these degrees, so we can have our own individuals and have our own Sangha members fight the narratives that are coming out against us. So now shifting over to the main topic that I was asked to speak about, the history of Sikhs in California, which is, again, the main focus of my dissertation as well. More specifically, my dissertation focuses on the history of Stockton Gurudwara. To begin, just I want to pose a question to individuals sitting here. By show of hands, how many of you guys have seen this article appear, whether it's through someone else's presentation, through a quick Google search? Okay, so the article is typically used to highlight Sikh immigration to the United States. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle in 1899, and it talks about on April 6, 1899, 4 Sikhs arrived in San Francisco, marking the beginning of Sikh immigration. And it's constantly used by our community as well and our community organizations to highlight Sikh immigration to the United States. However, when digging a little bit deeper and understanding the role that newspapers play in controlling the narrative and writing a specific narrative, when we're writing allowed to land, the term allowed, for a group to be allowed to land, it insinuates a social hierarchy with the dominant group giving the inferior groups permission to do something. More specifically, these 4 individuals, a few days later, although people still use this article to highlight Sikh immigration and celebrate how Sikhs finally came to the United States, when we dig a little bit deeper as to how these 4 individuals were treated when they came to the United States, first and foremost, you'll see they're labeled as Hindus, which I'll touch upon a little bit the next slide. But they talk about Hindus will worship the sun from San Francisco housetops. When they talk about sun, and they start labeling these individuals as sun worshippers from Lahore. The reason why they refer to them as sun worshippers is because a journalist was following these 4 individuals for 2 weeks, and noticed that these individuals would pray when the sun would rise, and then would pray when the sun would set. So for us, that's Nitnem, right? Amrit Vela, and then Shamnu when we do Redas. But for this white audience, it was something different. For them, they believed that the reason why we were praying when the sun rose and when the sun set was because we were praying, and these Sikhs were praying to the sun itself. So just understanding how the newspaper can really play a role in controlling the narrative. And then the second picture that you see on your right-hand side was an advertisement. So these first 4 individuals actually came as merchants. They were businessmen who came here to sell silk. And if you notice the writing on the top right-hand, it says the Hindu sun worshippers who arrived from Lahore, India, the only people of their sect in America, will be in the store all day Friday and Saturday. Don't fail to see these extraordinary people. They talk about these 4 Sikhs as if they were a show. They don't talk about how these individuals came as businessmen and how they're wealthy businessmen who came here to make a business and then return to Punjab in the long run. But more specifically, look at these individuals who are wearing these turbans that we've never seen before. Come see them as if they're a circus show. And just to backtrack, so for the United States, this now became a new problem. On the left-hand side, you see a political cartoon of Uncle Sam removing and kicking a Chinese immigrant out of the United States. And on the right-hand side, you see something similar with Uncle Sam removing, saying, take this impossible thing back. We don't want it over here. And then you also see the Viceroy of India, haha, not me. Right? So this state of where do Sikhs really belong? The US does not want them. British India does not want them. This was a moment where they really had to understand where is home and what is our homeland. But in the United States, there was a series of anti-Asian discrimination that really began with the Chinese in the late 1800s. But when Sikhs started to arrive, we noticed they was in Bellingham, Washington in 1907, when a large number of white individuals mass protested against Sikh workers in Bellingham, Washington in 1907 and removed them from the city. Later on in 1913, the Alien Land Law Act was passed in California, which prohibited Asians from owning any land in the United States. And then finally, the Hindu label that I want to touch upon, because you also see it on the right-hand side where they have, although it's a turban-wearing individual who has a pagan, they're still labeled as Hindus, and it's because they saw anyone who came from India as a Hindu. These newspaper journalists did not know any better, and there's a lack of knowledge from their end. So a lot of this earlier newspaper that you'll see refers to Sikhs as Hindus, although more than 90% of those who came from South Asia in the early 1900s were Sikhs. For example, and examples of other attacks against Sikhs. One in Marysville, California, just near Yuba City, when they were driven out of the city. And then at UC Berkeley, when seniors and students were hazing turban-wearing individuals, those who were Pagna, and trying to forcibly remove Pagna from these students on UC Berkeley's campuses. And then the final one you see about how they talk about when Sikh women are looking to arrive in California, they mention the word swarm as if it's in a negative connotation. So what was the response from the Sikh community? Eventually they decided that Sikhs needed to establish their own society and their own location where they can, and from their own constitution they establish a Sikh society in order to bring East Indians into unity for the welfare of the human race. And on the left-hand side, it's a drawing from an individual from Riverside, and it's depicting a meeting in Holt, California, where the first meeting was held because Jawaharlal Singh and Vasaka Singh, two of the founders of Stockton Gurdwara, they had owned over 500 acres of land in Holt, California, which is about 10-15 miles west of Stockton, California. And then on the left-hand side is the original picture from the 1915 Stockton Record newspaper. And once again, you see them referred to as Hindus. It states the Hindus who are congregating here in large numbers dedicate new Sikh temple on Grant Street. So I'll just keep going. So initially established in 1912, the Gurdwara was not what we understand the Gurdwara to be in the present day. I know a lot of individuals refer to the Gurdwara as a Sikh temple, including our own community refers to the Gurdwara as a Sikh temple or a Sikh place of worship. But it diminishes the power of the Gurdwara in itself, because the Gurdwara in itself is meant to be a social, political, cultural, and religious hub, not just a Sikh place of worship. If we understand what the Gurus meant for the Gurdwara to be, it really traces it back to it being more than just a place of worship or a Sikh temple. For example, in 1914, the Stockton Gurdwara had sent 2 delegates from the Gurdwara to fight for immigration rights in Washington, D.C., and they spoke on behalf of all South Asians in the United States for immigration rights in front of the U.S. Congress. More specifically, something that we all might be a little bit familiar with is Stockton Gurdwara is commonly referred to as the home of the Gadri Babe, Gadri Babe Ithasik Asthan. The Gadar Party was an anti-colonial movement that really fought for a sovereign state and really to remove colonialism and remove the British from India. Although we commonly understand, and a lot of people talk about the Gadar Lehar beginning in Astoria, Oregon, which on the left-hand side is the Finnish Socialist Hall, which is considered to be the site of the founding conference of the Gadar. And ultimately, it was burned down later in 1923 and then turned into a hotel. But in the present day right now, it is a Motel 6. So just to understand, sometimes there are significant sites that are not with us any longer, but we may be walking by a Motel 6 and not even notice that this is where the Gadar Party was quote unquote started. However, why I say quote unquote started, although people believe that the Gadar Party was started in 1913 in this hall, during discussions at the whole farm that belonged to Jawala Singh and Vasaka Singh on Guru Gobind Singh's Gurpurab in 1911, more specifically, they celebrated in December 27th, 1911. The tyranny of the British government was a focal point at the time. On the left hand, on the top, you see an image of where the site is, 1936 Tejpaul Street. That's where the Stockton Gurdwara is presently. And then the red dot is where the camp of Jawala Singh and Vasaka Singh was at. So you can, as you can see, roughly 12 miles from the Stockton Gurdwara. So coming back to this 1911 meeting that they had at the camp, although a lot of people like to give credit of the Gadar Party to Hardyal, he was present at this meeting in 1911. And though individuals like to say that he was responsible for establishing the Gadar Party, Baba Vasaka Singh's recollection of Guru Gobind Singh's Gurpurab offers another point of view. He writes in a kavita form, and he recalls this event. Vasaka Singh specifically speaks to an interaction between himself, Lala Hardyal, and Parmanand. The latter two, Hardyal and Parmanand, rose during the second day of the Gurpurab celebrations and shared the conditions of British India. Upon hearing the passion of Hardyal and Parmanand, the leadership of the camp, being Jawala Singh and Vasaka Singh, had asked them to join them in working for a free homeland. However, according to Vasaka Singh at the time, Hardyal specifically stated that he would not be able to partake in any revolutionary activities because he had only recently arrived to the United States, and he was scared that he would be detained, and that was a major concern for him. So in 1911, when Jawala Singh and Vasaka Singh and these Gadri Babis in Stockton, California were already working and scheming about the Gadar Leher, Lala Hardyal, who individuals like to prop up as the main leader behind the Gadar Party, specifically said he cares about his own immigration status and does not want anything to do with the Gadar Leher. On the bottom, it's a handwritten note from one of the secretaries of Stockton Gurdwara from the 1940s, and in it you can see they write, "Eho hi Pacific Coast Khalsa Diwan Stockton hai, jithon hi desh di azadi lai sade buzurgan vich jagrat aayi si." So he talks about how this is the very Pacific Coast Khalsa Diwan Stockton from which our elders woke up and decided to fight for a free country. They continue to go on and write, "They went to our country and were martyred and became shaheeds in great numbers. The result of this is in front of us." Although later on in the years, as the Gadar Leher, when the 1913 meeting happened and when people believed it finally had established, although the work had continued for 2 years, and then the Astoria, Oregon headquarters had then shifted down to San Francisco, where the Gadar Leher had two headquarters, the initial one on Hill Street and then one on Wood Street. Although there were 3 ultimate sites that I would like to highlight. The first being, of course, the San Francisco sites that individuals are typically aware of, the Gadar headquarters on 5 Wood Street. The second being Stockton Gurdwara, and then the third being the camp. So this camp, Jawala Singh's camp, before the Stockton Gurdwara was even established, that was a location where Sikhs would gather and do path in the evening or in the mornings as well, and they would have constant meetings about a free homeland. So in order to, although Stockton Gurdwara was the main institution for Sikhs and broader South Asians at this time, they weren't, because of the Alien Land Law Act that I mentioned earlier that was passed in 1913, they wanted to separate Stockton Gurdwara from a revolutionary movement, at least from the public point of view, that way to save Stockton Gurdwara from being taken away from the Sikh community. So they decided to have San Francisco be the main headquarters, and then Stockton Gurdwara was a broader meeting location as the broader community would visit Stockton Gurdwara. And as we're aware, the Gurdwara stages is a platform for the community to speak to the broader audience. And the third location, the farm in Holt, California, that was meant to be a secret camp in which weapons trainings and bomb manufacturing was happening. During the research, as these Gadar Leher and as the Gadai Babe were doing more research, they also began to establish their own writings, including the Gadar newspaper, Gadar Digund, and several other articles and newspapers at this time. While doing some research on the Gadar Leher more specifically, I just want to note a few things that I believe will then be discussed a little bit later as well. To note, for example, the British had spent 1/16 of their income on education at the time, and 1/3 of their income on military. Just some numbers to understand what the British India's focus was and why Sikhs and the Gadri Babe were so adamant on fighting for a sovereign state. And then money that was sent back to British India by those in the diaspora for famine relief was then actually spent on the Burmese war. So the misallocation of funds. And then furthermore, 20 million pounds at that time was sent as pensions and salaries back to England, which is equivalent to 2.2 billion pounds or $2.5 billion today. And then at that time in 1913, less than 10% of those, it was a less than 10% literacy rate in British India. And the Gadar Leher, I don't want to discuss too much into it because the talks of a sovereign state will be discussed later by the other panelists. But it is mentioned over and over again that if there weren't traitors amongst the Gadar revolutionaries, the revolution would have been successful for a sovereign state in the early 1910s. Shifting to a later period and the expansion of Stockton Gurdwara, Stockton Gurdwara became known as the capital of the Sikh faith in the United States and was the sole Gurdwara in the United States up until the 1940s, which then the El Centro Gurdwara was established in Southern California, and those two were the only Gurdwaras up until the late 1960s, in which we get Gurdwaras established here in the Bay Area, in Yuba City. But at this time, there were several significant figures who were attached, significant figures to American history who were attached to Stockton Gurdwara, including Bhagat Singh Thind and then Dalip Singh Sand. Bhagat Singh Thind, who is celebrated for being the first Sikh in the US Army in 1918. He had also fought the landmark case, Bhagat Singh Thind versus United States, which changed the definitions for exclusion as Caucasian, the word Caucasian, although we understand it now to be equivalent to white, at that time it was not meant to be equivalent to white, and rather it was an anthropological definition that was referring to a specific location in Central Asia and South Asia. And later on, he became a spiritual writer and philosopher. He had actually received a certificate from Stockton Gurdwara, a certificate of being a Sikh Gyani at that time in 1932, which I don't believe Gurdwaras offer that anymore in the present day. The second figure that I want to discuss is Dalip Singh Sand. He was a student at Berkeley, and his education was sponsored by Stockton Gurdwara. And later on, he became the secretary of Stockton Gurdwara and then a judge, and he's celebrated most as the first Asian American member of Congress. However, during his time as secretary of Stockton Gurdwara, because he was deemed in this state of quote-unquote educated Sikhs, he brought several reforms to Stockton Gurdwara, including the introduction of chairs inside the main hall in Stockton Gurdwara. So several changes were brought to the Sikh tradition, and they occurred because they referred to these Sikhs in the 1940s and 50s as being better educated, and those who came before them were backward and unnecessarily strict interpretations of Gurdwara etiquettes. So understanding how the impact of being in the West more specifically impacted Stockton Gurdwara. Here's another picture of Stockton Gurdwara in the 1960s. The interior of Stockton Gurdwara, as you can see, not only are they sitting on kursiyan, on chairs, but again, they remove, they're not covering their heads as well. And then they also, if you can see down here, they also have shoes on as well. Because again, the aspect of the Gurdwara from what the Gadri Babe meant for it to be as a political, social, and cultural institution was removed by this time, and it became what we refer to the Gurdwara as now as a Sikh temple, a place of worship. And again, at this time, the only other example of a place of worship or a temple was a church. So a lot of church practices were then introduced to the Gurdwara, and this was because they believed that they had become, quote unquote, better educated. And this was where their education had gone towards. And their education meant to become more American and more associated with whiteness. However, this had changed with the 1965 Immigration Act, when, again, immigration opened up and more Sikhs began to arrive. Again, the United States was seeking educated individuals because the Medicare and Medi-Cal was passed, so they needed doctors and nurses. The space race was happening, so they needed engineers. So because of a number of things that had changed in the 1960s, a wave of Sikhs had then began to come to the United States really in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And it was at this time when they saw what was happening in Stockton Gurdwara, they began to forcibly remove the kursiyan from inside. And from what I've heard, and in that period, I still have to conduct more research because my dissertation is actually up until 1965. So my dissertation technically ends here. But I've conducted several oral history interviews with Bajurgs who have lived through this time period, and they mention how they would first remove the first row of kursiyan, then the second, then the third, and eventually it became what it is now, and no kursiyan indoors or inside the main hall, and then the practice of the Sikh practices were then reintroduced to the Gurdwara. And again, we then get another shift in the narrative with 1984. And then in Stockton, we get a revival of needing to talk about the Sikh narrative and what's happening to Sikhs. The World Sikh newspaper was started following the 1984 attack, and we see the narrative of Stockton Gurdwara once again beginning to change, and Stockton Gurdwara becoming a location where the sovereignty and the Sikh state could be a focal point for the Sikh community. We see, again, Stockton Sikhs honor martyrs, modern day Khalsa March for Khalsan here in Fremont. And then on the bottom one, it was actually a Nishan Sahib and a photo of Pindranwale that was displayed at Fresno State. So once again, just to wrap it up and then hand it over to the next speaker who will touch more on this topic, we see a shift from the Gurdwara where it was meant to be a sovereign institution where we can talk about sovereignty, we can talk on what the Gadri Babis did and what they showed, we can talk about what was happening in Punjab, to the mid-1900s when Sikhs became more quote-unquote educated and they wanted to become more like whites and become more like Americans and introduced these practices, these church practices from the Gurdwara. And once again, with the 65 Immigration Act, and then what happened in 1984, we see a reemergence of Sikh practices, as well as this talk of sovereignty and the talk of a free homeland for Punjab. Thank you so much. And I believe we're doing Q&As all together at the end, right? Yeah. Okay.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Are these things working? Oh, on the box. Okay. Testing. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a couple of things about where Tejpaul Singh kind of left off and transitioning that into the modern day, and how really we like to say that we experienced a genocide. We like to say how it was a 1984 Sikh genocide, and truly it was much more than that. And if you look at our current day status as Sikhs today, our genocide never ended. It just kind of transformed into a different version. The cultural erasure, the linguistic erasure, the physical erasure when it comes to assassinations is still there. So our genocide is still happening, which is why I continue to call it the ongoing Sikh genocide. So what is genocide? It is the intentional and systematic extermination or extermination attempt of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So, extermination. We've seen this in very physical ways when it goes back to the decade of disappearances from 85 to 95, where Indian police would actually come from village to village, abducting youth and disappearing them. So that was the physical extermination and erasure of Sikhs. So, like I mentioned, involves mass killings, causing bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions leading to the group's physical destruction. So when you talk about what is the core of these people, what is the core of Sikhs, you go back to Gurbani. And how do you separate Sikhs from Gurbani? You erase Punjabi, you erase Gurmukhi from their learning, from their understanding, from their knowledge level. When you erase that, they separate from Gurbani, and they separate from what truly propels them forward, what will educate them, what will transcend time and continue to fill them with spirit. So if you look at what's happening now, whether it comes to the drug epidemic, which we know is not a natural phenomenon, these drugs are funneled in by the state, and the cartels that distribute them, all the distribution networks are protected by the Indian state. So our genocide, when it comes to water diversion, that Punjab is 86% farmers, and farmers need water to make their crops grow. So divert their water so that these farmers are forced to dig hundreds of feet underground to get water. Even though Punjab is literally made on the name of river water. Punjab is the land of 5 rivers. So the land of 5 rivers does not have enough water to feed its crop, and they are forced to drill hundreds of feet down in the ground. So these things are a continuation of the physical genocide that Sikhs were going through. So when you talk about Indian law, sorry, these are graphic images. When you talk about Indian law, our youth, our Naujawan were picked up and exterminated, mass exterminated, and it was all under the umbrella of Indian law. It was all justified. It is all okay in the eyes of the world. When it's portrayed in Indian newspapers, it's these terrorists were caught and these terrorists were killed. So Indian law justifies our genocide. So this was an example of times where it was justified. Continuing on, when we look at life sentences for Sikhs who just have literature, they have books on our shaheeds, they have books on Khalistan, they have books on sovereignty, and they are given life imprisonment in India. These are all different facets of a genocide. They not only will stop you from advocating for that, but they're also stopping you from learning about it. And the punishment is, je tusi ede bare sikhunge, you will rot in our jails. So this misconception, it comes from here, the misconception that there is no momentum for Sikh sovereignty in Punjab. Well, the price to pay for talking about sovereignty in Punjab is jail or death. These are the two outcomes that come from talking about sovereignty in Punjab. So when we look at diaspora and we say, why in San Francisco did 150,000 Sikhs come out and voice their support for Khalistan? It's because we don't have a gun pointed at our head when it comes to talking about our freedom. When Sikhs want to talk about their freedom in countries that truly have freedom of speech, they congregate and they voice their support for it. So then it begs the question, why Punjab? Why is the state, the Indian state, so focused on Punjab? And the answers we'll touch on briefly. So before I get into the facts, Punjab only covers 1.5% of the geographical area. Out of all of India, the modern Punjab, which is a third of what it truly was after 47 partition, modern Punjab is only 1.5%. So a very, very small percentage. However, some of the contributions that Punjab has. 50% of the 13 million tons of wheat produced to feed India during the lockdown was from Punjab. So half. 1.5% of the geographical area is providing half of the country's wheat. They're 16th in size, but the second highest contributor to India's army. So when you talk about Sikh soldiers, and when the Sikh soldiers put their Nishan Sahib on the borders of Pakistan and China, they're labeled as patriots. They're said, these are our brave Sikh brothers. But when those same Sikhs put the Nishan Sahib at the Red Fort, then they're terrorists. So this double standard has continually existed. Whatever suits the narrative of the Indian state is deemed patriotic, and whatever is counter to that narrative is deemed as extremist or terrorist. And a lot of this has to do with the lineage that Sikhs have. And we've seen, whether it goes from Akali Phula Singh, Nidhan Singh, Panj Hatha, Baba Hanuman Singh, I mean, this is not a thing that you can erase from Sikhs. Tejpaul Singh mentioned in the presentation right before me, Sikhs had migrated to a foreign land, thousands of miles away from what they've always known to be as home. And when they got here, they still talked about the freedom of the people back in their homeland. So sovereignty is not something that can be erased from Sikhs. Guru Sahib has given us Patshahi. In Garib Sikhan ko deo Patshahi. Patshahi is sovereignty. It means you are not governed by the laws of society. You are governed by the laws of Akal Purkh. And when you're governed by the laws of Akal Purkh, all of this, all the narrative, all the propaganda, all of the violence, all of the attempts to eliminate your voice will all subside. Because your Patshahi was given by the Guru, and the Guru is Pura. We bow our head to the Guru when we go to the Gurdwara. The Guru is Pura, is the extent of perfection. So when our Patshahi is given by the extent of perfection, and you think that mass eliminating them will finish off what their lineage has presented them, then that's why this is where the Indian state continues to be confused. That we, in 47, took away 60% of their native landmass. 1 million of them died in the partition. Then, when they got into Punjab, which is now a fraction of what it was, when they got to the Punjab in India, they had to start a Punjabi Suba movement, which was the right to have their own language spoken in their state.
as opposed to the rest of India, which was divided based on a linguistic basis. Punjab had to fight. Darbar Sahib was invaded during the Punjabi Suba movement. Just as today saying Khalistan Zindabad can get you life imprisonment in India, then saying Punjabi Suba Zindabad could get you life imprisonment or death. So this is a pattern. And this is not something that is going to subside. The fact that we're having these conversations today is evidence that it will not ever truly be erased. So when you have such a rich history, when you have a history of people who have continually put justice ahead of their own well-being, who have come from a guru who said, "Panth vase main ujjada." The Guru said, the Panth must flourish even if I am completely annihilated. And we have people following that lineage. So, what are some of the countermeasures that the Indian state must take? Well, one thing is separating us from our text, separating us from our history. So, I have this picture here intentionally. This is an image of the Sikh reference library in 1984. And the narrative that continues to be fed to us to this day is, this burned down during the attack. That when the Indian army went in to attack, this reference library burned down. Now, eyewitnesses will tell you that we saw the Indian army taking everything from this reference library, putting it in trucks, and there are even people who know the location of where our artifacts and our text was taken to Amritsar hostels and things around. But the narrative that we keep believing is that all of our thousands of artifacts, all of our Hath Likht Sroops, all of our, irreplaceable artifacts were burned. That's the narrative we believe. So as we sit here, or as we stand and have this conversation in 2024, these texts, artifacts, all of these things are still in the possession of the Indian state. So when we talk about a genocide, it is not just shooting you in the head. A genocide has, like an octopus, it has very different extensions. And erasing your history, erasing your language, erasing you physically, and then encouraging or forcing your youth to be, within this drug epidemic. That is all signs of a genocide. Punjab is the highest in the country for uranium contamination. As these farmers dig underground, uranium is coming out. And we scratch our heads and say, why are cancer rates so prevalent in Punjab? Why is cancer so widespread? It's because when we are pulling the underground water supply and we don't have rights to our own river water, and think about this in context. Every state that has a natural resource in India has rights over that natural resource. If a state sells coal, or has coal naturally, they sell that to the rest of the countries, the rest of the country. If a state has sand naturally, they sell that sand. If a state has wood or a specific kind of tree, they sell that wood. But Punjab, since 1947, has been getting looted of its water. The Punjab has received no royalties for any of the water that runs through it. International riparian law says if water touches your land, you have rights to that water or that resource first. But Punjab is kept excluded from this. And since 1947 it has been. And now we are at a point where a state that relies so heavily on farming, which needs water, is now digging hundreds of feet underground. Many pinds in Punjab have now, in the past few years, experienced a complete depletion of underground water. The tube wells that extract water, overnight shut down because in their area now, hundreds of feet underground, there is no water left. And in the next 10 to 15 years, it's predicted that Punjab will have no underground water based on the consumption and based on how much they use. So in 15 years, when we have no water to fill the Sarovar at Harmandir Sahib, is that the point where we will advocate for this? Or is that the point where we will figure out what this genocide truly looks like? Because that is a direction that we will see in our lifetimes. 50%. So remember, Punjab is 1.5% of the geographical area. 50% of the total drugs seized in India in that 3-year span were from Punjab. Half. 1.5% of the country, it has half of the country's drugs. And we all see what's happening. When an Tejpaul Singh comes in and says, we are going to start a movement to rid the state of drugs, he's villainized, his character is assassinated, and he's put in a jail. So the Indian state is very actively protecting those who distribute drugs and preserving the channels that bring drugs into Punjab. Because there's a twofold benefit there. Not only do the politicians get money from corruption, but now the native people of Punjab, Sikhs, are lost. They're high on drugs. They have no chance of resistance. However, in 2020, when the farmers' protest started, the Indian state truly got a glimpse that even though we have worked for 25 years to infest Punjab with drugs, to sedate the next generation, that these youth are still breaking our barricades and coming to Delhi. So their tactics are changing continuously, but the genocide remains. 76% of drug users in Punjab are between 18 and 35. So this is your next generation. 3/4 of drug users in Punjab are between 18 and 35. This is the youth that is going to resist. This is the youth that when you have Sant Jarnail Singh Ji, Khalsa Pindrale talking about, we are going to talk about Punjab's rights, this is the age group of people that is going to back that movement up physically. So how do you sedate them? Through drugs. Punjab's own budget is used to line the canals that will take Punjab's own resource out of Punjab. 780 crore of Punjab's, 780 crore of Punjab's budget is used to line the Rajasthan canal, which is going to take Punjab's water and take it to Rajasthan. So not only does Punjab not have rights over its own water, it is now funding the diversion of its water to other states for free and using its own money to do that. So this is the outcome when the state is governed by a country who wants to see their elimination. So this is what a genocide looks like. Not only do you not have rights to your own resource, but we're going to use your budget to take your resources. In a 4-year span, Punjab lost so much groundwater that you could fill the Dead Sea between Israel and Jordan. In a 4-year span, and remember, this is Punjab, the land of 5 rivers, who has billions of dollars and billions of gallons worth of water flowing through it, but since it doesn't have rights, those farmers are digging underground. And they dug so much groundwater out that in 4 years, in that 4-year span, they lost 109 cubic kilometers, which is enough to fill that sea. So moving forward with the topic, when we say 1984 Sikh genocide, it's a disservice. It's a disservice to everything that happened after and everything that continues to happen today. We almost refer to the Sikh genocide as something that started and began. Something that began and ended in 1984. And that's incorrect. Based on everything that we're witnessing today, based on the circumstances that we see today, based on the farmer bills, on Bhai Tejpaul Singh, on Deep Sidhu's assassination, on Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination, on the attempted assassination of Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, all of these, Paramjit Singh Panjwad, Avtar Singh Khanda, these things are happening in the last 2 years. And we talk about our genocide, कि साडा कत्लेआम 84 च होया. It's still happening. It's changed the way that it looks slightly, but the intention is the same, to eliminate you, to eliminate your soch, and to eliminate your aspiration for sovereignty. And further, to eliminate your ability to speak about it, which is why if you speak about these things, your page is automatically banned in India. So, countries with the most internet shutdowns. It's not a surprise that our pages are shut down, because within the country themselves, they shut down the internet 154 times in just a 2-year span. Kashmir experienced a longer than 1 full year internet shutdown. They had no internet in all of Kashmir for longer than a year. And anytime they are going to commit some sort of atrocity or use drones to tear gas people or attack people, they shut the internet down. And it's stated that this is to protect them. So this is how the world hears it, that the Indian government is protecting people by shutting the internet down. But for a country that claims to be a democracy, that shuts down the internet this much, what are they hiding? The people from there know what they're hiding. We know what they're hiding. But the world is going to begin to understand what the Indian state is hiding. As they continue to fall down the World Press Freedom Index, they're 165th out of 103 countries, 183 countries. So they're at the bottom of the list. So when they talk about we're the world's biggest democracy, but they're also locking up journalists and silencing them at every juncture, you begin to question how they're truly a democracy. So just in that year, in 2019, they shut the internet down 121 times. The next closest country was Venezuela with 12. And this is the world's biggest democracy, is what they want to tell the world. And these are the legs that the United States creates alliances with. The Indian government is saying, or Canada, any country in the world says, that's a democracy. People native to there understand how it's not, and they are beginning to, the rest of the world, the Western world, is beginning to understand how they are not a democracy and never will be a democracy. So just one small example I'll give of the double standard of Indian law. This is Bilkis Bano. She was gang raped by Indians during the Gujarat pogroms of 2002 or 2003. 7 of her family members were killed by these Indian extremist mobs. And the people that did it were released 14 years later. They were greeted with garlands. They distributed sweets saying, you guys kind of did a service for our nation by doing this. And remember, thousands of Muslims were murdered and thousands of Muslim women were gang raped in cold blood at the approval of the current Prime Minister of India. So if you need any sort of a hint on what India truly is, the current Prime Minister of India was banned from coming to the United States, was banned from going to England for human rights violations. And he became Prime Minister of India. The populace elected him saying, "You are going to save our country." So that gives you kind of an idea of where the voter base is, what their ideals are. So they're released after 14 years. But we have our Singhs who have been in Indian prisons for over 30 years. Many times for crimes that they haven't even proven that they've done, for any crime. So this is the double standard of Indian law. You speak India's narrative, you are rewarded. You follow their agenda of one language, one religion, one nation, then you are rewarded. However, if you say, hey, actually, we're going to speak about our rights. We are going to advocate for our rights. So you are given a violent greeting. So how does India quell diasporic support for Khalistan? For freedom, for Sikhs' freedom? Well, one way is by assassinating the people that talk about it. So they've successfully assassinated Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and they've successfully assassinated Avtar Singh Khanda, and they've successfully assassinated Paramjit Singh Panjwar in Pakistan. But how do they stretch beyond that? Well, you can see they're vandalizing their own mandars. Not too far from here, they've vandalized a mandar. And the continuous propaganda being floated today is the same as it was in 84 for Sanjay Nelson, is that Khalistan is anti-Hindu. Sikhs are anti-Hindu. This is the Indian narrative. And why do they have to make you believe that Sikhs are anti-Hindu? Because the moment they convince you that Sikhs' freedom is somehow going to make the majority of India more fearful, is they can consolidate their support. They can say that when a Rajiv Gandhi organizes mobs to massacre Sikhs, he's elected in Indian Parliament as the Prime Minister of the nation with over 400 seats, which is unprecedented in India. Modi has not received this kind of support. Indira Gandhi did not receive that kind of support, because when Rajiv Gandhi massacred Sikhs, he said, these Sikhs are the menaces, we are going to eliminate them. And then the general population applauded him and re-elected him with drastic numbers. So how do they push that narrative? So they continue to scare the Indian population, even though we know that Sikh sovereignty is not anti any faith. When we talk about Sarbat da Pala, every human being, every animal, the environment goes into Sarbat da Pala. But the reason they have to twist that narrative is to gain the support, so that when they are going to send 100,000 soldiers to arrest Amritpal Singh, that you don't question it, because Amritpal Singh is anti-Hindu. That's what they want you to believe. So there's going to be Khalistan voting in September, a month before. A mandir in Toronto is vandalized. There's going to be Khalistan voting in January, on January 28th. On January 6th, the mandir is vandalized, magically. This is happening in countries, and months before Khalistan referendum voting is going to happen. And these pictures are going to be snapped, and they're going to be played all over Indian media, because Khalistan, anti-Hindu. This is the picture that they're trying to join. So, some questions that we should ask ourselves. If Punjab was free, would drugs be funneled into our state unabated? Would our gurdwaras be invaded? Would our water be diverted? Would our water be looted? Would our farmers be exploited? Would our language be erased? Would we have any board in Punjab where Punjabi was missing? Would we have any book in Punjab where it was written in Hindi and there was no hint of Punjabi on there? If Punjab was free, would those be the circumstances? And I'll get to my last slide here. So it seems like a big task, but what can we do individually? Well, one primary thing is connect to the one thing that they want to break you from. They want to break you from Gurbani. They want to break you from a guru. They want to break you from Namabhyas, from Nitnem, from martial arts. They want you to break you from your history, from Punjabi. These are all things the state is working extremely hard to separate you from. So naturally, connecting to those things is going to be one thing that is an obstacle for them and beneficial for you. Sikh student associations, a connection of them, and we're seeing this happen gradually, is where Sikh student associations across the globe are kind of speaking about the same narrative now to an extent. And I think that can be improved on. Pro-India, this is a very important clarification to make. If you are pro-India, you are anti-Sikh. If you say you are Indian, if you say that I identify as Indian, then you identify with the genocide of Sikhs. So pro-India is anti-Sikh. This is a very simple distinction we can make. When we shy away from using the term Khalistan, this is a byproduct of Indian propaganda. India's propaganda has villainized the term so much that when someone in India is called a Khalistani, they back up and they say, I'm not a Khalistani, don't call me a Khalistani. When in fact, you should be proud of the term. Because when you say you're Khalistani, you say, I stand against the genocide of my people. I stand for Sarbat da Pala. I stand for all of the principles of Sikhi when you say I'm a Khalistani. When you say I'm an Indian, now you are misidentifying who I am. I'm not an Indian. You can call me a Sikh, you can call me a Punjabi, you can call me a Khalistani, but I cannot be identified as Indian. These are distinctions that we have to learn. Public displays of factual information. You would be surprised. We put up a billboard on 101 that said Sikhs need freedom. Just a few weeks after that, they vandalized a mandir. Sikhs need freedom, 3 words with an image, and we had the website askindiawhy.com. It was a very simple display of information, and it bothers the state because the moment people start to unravel what the Indian state truly is, they start to get rid of the facade that India is a democracy. And they start to challenge those notions, which is what the state doesn't want. And finally, understand our Gulami. The Gulami that Sant Pindwala used to talk about 40 years ago has only worsened now. When he said, "Tusi Gulami dekh lo kado galo launi hai," it has not improved now. It's gotten worse. The water that was 10 feet below the ground is now 400 feet below the ground. The texts, the beadabis that were happening every once in a while now are happening daily. The Gulami, the signs of Gulami, which is subservience, the signs of Gulami are there for us, and they're crystal clear. So understand, how are we going to rid ourselves from these shackles of subservience? So these are some points that we can use to potentially improve ourselves and move forward with how we are going to come up with tangible solutions for the freedom of Sikhs. And with that, I will conclude. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Prabhjot Singh, Tejpaul Singh, thank you for your powerful messages. It's an honor and it's humbling to share this panel with you. I cannot appreciate your words enough, and I hope to push this message forward in my presentation. As I look around this room, I'm seeing a lot of old friends, a lot of new friends, Sangat members and mentors, and my family. I'm so thankful that you are here to share this conversation, and I hope this is meaningful to you as we move forward in this presentation. Pyar na fateh bulao, Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh. I have been asked to submit some contributions to the conversation of Sikhi and mental health, activism, and psychology. I hope to present a softer message that is more palatable for some of you. And although I'm not an authority on these subject matters, at least not yet, I will attempt to submit some comments for your consideration. Hopefully they inspire, hopefully they provoke thought and some discussion into your own lives. Before I start, I will submit some of my qualifications for this, because talking about mental health is no light matter. My biggest impact currently is with the CAD Nasha Mukt Samaj, which is a statewide peer-led harm reduction approach that oversees 70 high school interns in the state of California. This is funded by your taxpayer money, and we prevent drugs on high school campuses in a direct intervention model. We are concerned with the increase of drug usage, not only in Punjabi communities, but in people of color communities across the state and across the nation. Our team is mostly Punjabi Sikhs. I've overseen this team of 70 interns over the last 2 years, and I run the Bay Area chapter of this program. We collaborate with local health departments on solution-oriented education and prevention. We're focused on harm reduction here. We present community assessments, we collaborate with local community organizers, and we conduct many assessments and ongoing research. These are our introductory intervention models to ensure that the future of the Sikh youth in California is protected. These are leaders that are in the making, and we hope that these interns that go into colleges and universities and later on in their careers have an impact. California has a long legacy of community activism amongst Sikhs. Tejpaul Singh touched upon that. We are here to ensure that these populations, our populations, are not compromised. So this is the direct work that I've been involved in for the last 2 years. We also certify our students educationally, professionally. Our biggest impact is the fact that we brought drug prevention toolkits and overdose response kits to every high school in California. That's 482 cities, 10,000 schools, and almost 6 million students that are affected by our direct efforts. We are here to prevent drugs and their consumption on these high school campuses for the long run. America is currently going through a drug epidemic. It's a drug crisis. Teenagers have never been using drugs at this level ever. And this has happened since the pandemic, and it's ongoing, and we are directly involved in preventing this. So this is the direct work that I've been involved in. I'm also a psychological researcher and clinical practitioner. My focus is on mental health community work. It's on interventional psychotherapy. I specialize in serving Black, Indigenous, and people of color populations and providing treatment models for people like us. And my subject matters include mindfulness, meditation, hospital chemical rehab, prevention science, intersectionality, and integrative healthcare. These are the few subject matters that I'm currently specializing in. My Sikh qualifications are that I've been involved in Rag Vidya, Gurbani Vidya, and Shastra Vidya from an early age because Fremont is a robust community that takes care of its youth and provides wellness and educational outcomes from our Gurdwara and just our general community. I'm going to be commenting about Sikhi, I'm going to be commenting about psychology and mental health, and I'm going to be commenting on activism. And before I say anything, it is a good idea for you to know what my background is so that you have a better context of what I'm even saying. I will start off with Sikhi. This is not a well-known fact, not even by our own people, let alone the general public that acknowledges our identity. We are the first knowledge-based religion on this planet. We were made to be the religion of scholars. Sikh means student. We are tied to the knowledge. We are the first people to establish that the soul is the function of the mind. Man, tu jyot swaroop hai, apna mool pashan. The mind is the soul manifest. We must recognize its meaning. And this was said 5 centuries ago by Guru Amar Das Ji. It is proof that we have commented on the mind in a direct and applicable way that is spread across 25 million Sikhs, at the very least, in today's age. The mind is the physical manifestation of our soul. Our jyot is located in the mind. It is not a transparent, ghost-like spirit that can travel through walls and bodies as Western thought will have you believe. No, it is a beautiful, colorful, warm fire. Jyot means fire. Jyot means light, our spirit, our soul is physically manifested by the mind. And Guru Amar Das Ji says this. We are the first people, the Sikhs are the first people to arrive to this conclusion. A very basic conclusion that we all think is regular and normal to our thoughts. But this is a very fundamental conclusion. One of our biggest contributions to psychology and how we understand the mind. Psychologists and the greater field of science is only now arriving to this theme and this conclusion. The academic sciences are only now starting to see the overlap between the soul and the mind in a philosophical way. And we've been doing this for 500 years. This is an important consideration for all people, but specifically for Sikhs who wish to understand their reality further. I'm setting up the stage, the philosophical stage, to continue this conversation, because this is a really fundamental distinction that we currently have that is not addressed directly. When somebody asks you what Sikhi's contribution is, this is your contribution. We understand the soul in a way that has not been understood before and after. By winning the mind, you win the world. By winning the mind, you win the world. Your understanding of the world is only as good as your understanding of the mind. From the mind comes your understanding of reality. To love your reality, you must love the actions and inactions of your mind. To hate your reality, you must hate what your mind gives you. To change your reality, you must change your mind. And to win your reality, you must win your mind. Man jeeta, jag jeet. A very fundamental theme that everyone here in this room has most likely heard of. I must say it explicitly so that the conversation can move forward. When it comes to the mind, when it comes to our mental health, the people in this room have something called the freedom of thought. We finally have it. We haven't had it for a long time, at least not the majority of us. The Sikh Panth has not had the freedom of thought for a long time, but we finally have it, and we can observe it, and we can address our own community. After a century of British colonialism, a century, and after another 76 years of a divided Punjab and modern colonialism, because modern colonialism in our context is the Hindustani cleansing of Punjab for 76 years. It is the cleansing through violence and further division. It's the extraction of our resources, our farming resources, our water resources, our educational resources, health resources, economical and political resources, and finally, our spiritual and mental resources. All of these have been attacked, extracted, detached from Punjab, the Punjabi people, and the Sikhs. But as we sit here in this room, the freedom of thought is something that we have. We have it here amongst us, we have it in our communities, and in our own personal lives. This freedom of thought is not tolerated in India. Even the work that I mentioned earlier, the one that I do for the Khair Nasha Mukt Samaj, for preventing drugs, which is funded by the state of California, which is funded by your taxpayer dollars. This work would be illegal in California and my peers would be in jail. Simple basic healthcare work. This makes the work that I do here in your community, in our community in California, it makes this work a privilege when it should be a necessity. And it makes the work that I would do in Punjab an impossibility. This work is impossible in Punjab. Simple healthcare, free thought work. Those that have tried to prevent drug usage in Punjab are now sitting in jails. You saw the pictures that Dr. Prabhjot Singh put up. The freedom of thought, I must remind you, the freedom of thought is the freedom of power. India still doesn't recognize Sikhs as a sovereign identity, although every now and then Prime Minister Modi will tie a cute dastar and express how Sikh values are Indian values. And some of you will believe him. But individual expression and sovereign identities, these are privileges. These are privileges that you individually currently have sitting in California. Individual expression and sovereign identities, these are something that we are allowed to hold here in America. The same America that all of our community members in the past have immigrated here for, like Tejpaul has shown you. They came here for the privilege to not be persecuted. What does that mean to you? The privilege to not be persecuted. Isn't that just a basic human right? Sikh is the only expression in India, in that part of the world, that has originally allowed for the freedom of thought. Sikhs are naturally free thinkers. It's in our definition, it's in our name, it's in our philosophy, theory, and practice. And it's not just the freedom of thought, but a diverse freedom of thought. I'm telling you that Sikh is one of the freest and most diverse orientations to emerge as a spiritual and theoretical framework. That's what I'm telling you. Our scripture, our Gurbani, holds a diverse set of ideas. And it comes from, oh my God, so many different backgrounds and religions and spiritual orientations. And we have 43 authors of Sri Guru Granth Sahib. 43. From 43 different backgrounds as well. Our Guru has 43 different authors, and no other literature even comes close to this. No other written work has that much diversity, and millions of Sikhs around the globe read this spiritual scripture every single day. Now that's freedom of thought. That's listening to people around you. That's listening to the different people that have contributed to the regional philosophy, to the spiritual orientation, to the theoretical framework of our people. Sikhi encourages freedom of thought and diversity. Anek hain, fir ek hain. We believe in anekta as long as we have ekta. We are all connected by the one guiding force, the one spirit. We are all droplets of water in the same ocean. I don't care how many waves crash against each other, we're still all droplets of water. And some of us are saltier than others. When our 10th Guru cemented our identity, Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji, when he established the Khalsa Panth in 1699, through the creation of the Khalsa Panth, the formal name was given to the Sikhs as the Khalsa Panth. The first 5 initiated, the first 5 loved ones, the Panj Pyare, even they were diverse. They were from different castes, different classes, different regions, and different languages from each other. The formal creation of the community, along with the formal creation of our literature, and then the formal creation of our spirit, our culture, our theory, all of these things were fundamentally diverse and free. So we can come from different backgrounds and still be on the same page. It's the Sikh way of doing it. But considering, and also, I must add, considering what was happening around the world in 1699, the formation of the Khalsa, not even in my opinion, I think this is a fact, but this has not been published. Considering what was happening around the world at that time, during Guru Gobind Singh Ji's initiation of the Khalsa, the formation of the Panth made the Sikh Panth the most diverse, the most inclusive, the most equal, equitable, free, and cosmopolitan group to exist. We established sovereignty in a way that didn't even exist at the time. We're way ahead of our times, but we don't act like it. Guru Gobind Singh Ji didn't just give us the freedom of thought and diversity to us like a cute little office at some kind of company. No, he gave it through the means of sovereignty, of self-determination, freedom from being oppressed, freedom through systematic righteousness. He gave such a unique thing to us in such a unique way that has not been done since, by the way. Everybody who has tried to done it since has done it in a hypocritical way. Even India, who claims to be an all-inclusive democracy that has so many diverse cultures and languages, fails to do what it promises, and instead it does what you've already heard. Guru Gobind Singh Ji's message is that it's better to die asserting your freedom and thinking than to be alive and oppressed from your own authenticity. We live on as a people. We live on as a free-thinking people because our ancestors sacrificed their lives when we weren't free. Don't forget that. You're reminded of our shaheeds all the time, but don't forget about it when you enter spaces like colleges, universities, professional commitments. You are embodiments of your ancestors and you're embodiments of their struggle. So freedom of thought is freedom of reality. If you have a free mind, a truly free mind, then you have a truly free reality. This is a really abstract idea that I'm trying to get at. But as you may know, the topics of psychology are usually abstract. If you have a truly free mind, you have a truly free reality. If you win the mind, you win reality. Man jeeta, jag jeet. Moving forward in this conversation about freedom of thought, we finally have a powerful number of free thinkers in this community. Not just the California community, but in the diaspora itself. We finally have a powerful number of free thinkers. We are not as oppressed here in this room, in this community, in this nation, in the West, in the diaspora, as we are in India. I'm going to remind you again, the work that I'm doing here in California is not palatable for the Indian state. A lot of the work that we're doing here is not palatable by the Indian state. We can finally think for ourselves. Little kids are walking around these gurdware in our community. They're walking around with the same ideas that Sant Jarnail Singh Ji was killed and martyred for. Think about that. These kids are walking around with a sense of sovereign thinking, a freedom of expression, and self-determination. These are ideas that were met with blatant violence and extermination only a few decades ago. And they're still met with extermination in today's world and in today's diaspora. And I don't mean to minimize all these actions that have been currently taken against free thinkers of Punjab, of Sikhi. But these little kids are walking around with ideas that were villainized only a few decades ago. That is something to hold on to. That is something to have good hopes for. And that is something to be empowered by and to move with. We finally have a sense of self-determination that has allowed for the freedom of thought in Sikh community. We're talking about a lot of educated free thinkers that are emerging as a generational trend. So I must ask you, given that you are part of the Sikh Panth that lives outside of Punjab, given the fact that you have the capacity to think freely, truly think freely, and change your own reality, and you change your Panth's reality, you have power. You have more power than you even know. You have more power than your ancestors did in this way because they were met with extermination and shahidiyan. You have more power as a group because you are now more educated, more mobile, and more critical to make changes in the future. So I must ask you, what will you do with your free thinking? Will you bear the responsibility of being a member of this Panth? Will you enjoy the beauty of our people just as much as you deal with the burdens of our people? Will you enjoy the rose and its thorn? Or will you be ignorant, comfortable, incompetent, lazy, and scared of bearing the responsibility of free thought? The future of the community depends on your reality. What you choose to do with your mind, your capabilities, your gifts, your problems, if you choose to ignore what is in front of you, you choose to ignore a part of yourself. Freedom of thought means the freedom of acting on it too. It's not just a comfortable idea that we can just sit with or forget about after this presentation. Freedom of thought means the freedom of acting on it. How will you engage in activism? How will you think? How? How will you think? And what will you act on? Thank you.
I'm gonna have you guys. Can you grab another chair? Can you grab another chair for that table? I'm going to invite Jujhar Singh, Tejpaul Singh, and Prabhjot up to the table. We're gonna have a quick Q&A. All right. So before we get started, I actually want you three to give a formal introduction in the sense that, can you tell everyone here about your personal, professional background, going back to the theme of this series for Sikhs in higher education, kind of what helped you choose your pathway and what you plan to do moving forward. And obviously, the three of you have many contributions to the Panth, many contributions to the local community. So if you could touch on that a little bit as well, then we'll open it up to the Sangat here to ask questions as well. Yeah, just push the button. And then grab that live stream one too.
I chose psychology because, like I said, the mind is the most powerful thing that we own, and it possesses the most capacity for change. I have been involved in a lot of change making. I've changed a lot personally because I'm a recipient of a lot of education, a lot of intersectional outlook, of a lot of different kinds of beauty that I've enjoyed, and a lot of inspiration. So my clinical work, which is psychotherapy, it all revolves around change making. And I engage in my community work that I mentioned with substance abuse prevention because it is not only a communal issue, but is something that is a healthcare issue. So I'm involved in these change-making involvements because it allows for the most active engagement with the community in an impactful way that I see fit. I also teach Kirtan on Sundays at San Jose Gurdwara, which is a huge inspiration for me. I work with a lot of children. I've worked a lot with children in the past. And I fundamentally believe in the nurturing of the youth. And since I was nurtured as a member of the youth in my past, I hope to continue that into the future.
So the perfect segue from there, I am also in education. I am in special education. I received a doctorate in educational leadership, and that is the career path that I aspire to continue to move towards. As far as from a Banthan contribution standpoint, definitely not enough. There's awareness, there is social media awareness, but I hope the aspiration is to take that into a variety of angles, potentially media, print media, radio, whatever it might be, just different forms and fashion of talking about the Sikh narrative.
And I'm a PhD candidate at UC Riverside, focusing on Sikh diaspora, more specifically Sikhs in the United States. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the reason why I chose to pursue this path is seeing a lack of focus on the history of Sikhs in the diaspora and Sikh history in general. And broadly speaking, I'm also associated with fields of Asian American studies, ethnic studies, and history and preservation. And currently, I'm also serving on the committee at Stockton Gurdwara, and one of the reasons why was to gain access to the archives that Stockton Gurdwara has initially, but then also see how we can bring the focus that the government is really meant for Stockton Gurdwara to have back to the forefront.
All right, thank you. So I'm gonna open that up to the Sangat if anyone has any questions. Any questions specifically for a speaker or for them all together? I know it's past 8 o'clock, so I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you again for being here. I would ask the three of you if you have any words of encouragement for folks who are pursuing different types of degrees. I know the three of you have completely different, I guess, industries that you work in, but, for example, if someone's an engineer, someone's a lawyer, what kind of things that they can do, what kind of things that you know of as of now, as of tomorrow, or as of the next few months? What are some things that people can engage in to better serve our community?
I think I'll start. I think everyone has a role, and everyone can contribute productively through their role. So some people think, you're a speaker, so you take care of things. But not everyone can do everything. सारे चीज़ ध्यान नहीं पा सकते. सारे, people. Not everyone can fund it. Not everyone has a variety of abilities. So I'll say any field that you're in, whether it's a doctor, whether you're in art, whether you're in education, whether you're a teacher, whatever it is, there is a way that you can contribute so long as that is your aspiration. It's a very easy out to say, my field is not associated with political activism, so I'm going to take a hands-off approach. But there is always a way that you can meaningfully contribute. And I think that's how we should approach it.
And just adding to that, more specifically, I don't consider myself to be a public speaker. I'm more comfortable in the archives. Give me a bunch of books to read. Give me a bunch of old newspapers to read. I'm more comfortable in that. But then also, as Prabhjot was saying, everyone has a specific role to play, and understanding what our role is, and understanding that we're not meant to play every role is how we're going to prosper as a community. For example, Prabhjot is phenomenal in the social media aspect, really getting that word out to the Sangha. Whereas for me, the history work that I'm doing, I suck with social media. Again, I'm more than happy to write an article on it, more than happy to write a book on what's going on, but I cannot do the social media aspect. I cannot do the public speaking aspect. So it's just understanding whatever is your niche and understanding and making sure that we are constantly grounded in safety. And
I will offer what I offer my interns across the state who work on this prevention that I'm involved in. When it comes to your professional life, your educational life, aspire for the highest level of excellence that you are capable of. Aspire for the highest level of excellence you are capable of, because anything short of that will only let you down. And when you're aspiring for the highest level of excellence, when you're aspiring for the highest level of education, the highest level of work, the highest caliber of quality, you can keep your mat uchi, keep your man nima, mat uchi, something that we remember on a daily basis. So live up to it. Live up to it.
All right, thank you all. I'm gonna open it up. Okay, it looks like we do have a question, so I'm gonna pass this. Yeah. But just for lunch.
My question for Dr. Prabhjot Singh. So I know one of your slides you had that sentence. It was like, if you're pro India, you're anti-Sikh, right? And we believe that, and 100%. But in the day to day, when Jimmy has like where you go to work, you have, and they're like, oh, where are you from? Like, first of all, that question rubs me wrong all the way, because you're like, I'm from here, I grew up here, but you're like, where do I come from, right? My parents made it like, in Punjabi we say picho kitthon aaya, right? So for that, it's like there's like that second, you're like, do I just say Indian and end the conversation, or do I want to go down this path and say Punjab? And I feel like, I'm in a situation where like my family's not from Punjab, they're from Delhi, right? So like, but I still say, oh my god, I'm Punjabi, right? But then it's like, oh, isn't that in India? So like, how do you, like, what's your advice on navigating the conversation? Because I think someone who's not, like of the community, and you're in a day-to-day, how do you get that point across but not seem so political, right? Because no one wants to be political at work, but how do you still get your thought across and not feel like you're being dishonest with yourself?
Sure. Yeah. No, this is a question that comes up for me personally, very often. If you look at the history of Punjab, Punjab's identity supersedes Pakistan's identity and India's identity. So when you say you're Punjabi, you can be Punjabi and not Indian or Pakistani. Like, that identity supersedes it. So that's a very non-political way of saying where I'm from, where I originate from, was pre-partition. Just like some folks still put Palestine on their passports. They were in Palestine before Israeli occupation began, so they still write Palestine. So in the same way, we can say that we're Punjabi because Punjab's identity supersedes the identity of the partition that the British took over. And further, I think educating yourself on the differences. I'll give you just what I say. I say, if they say, isn't that in India? I'll say, no, it's north of India. Because I think the moment you say you're Indian, you acknowledge occupation. You kind of willingly acknowledge occupation. And so that is almost as problematic for me as anything, whether it's misgendering, whether it's calling me something entirely different from what I am. So I guess it depends on your personal preferences as well. But for me, saying that I'm Indian almost makes it for me that I am acknowledging a genocide, and further that I'm okay with it. And so that is a problem for me. I won't say it's a problem for anyone, but a quick answer is Punjab's identity. Punjab was there before India. Punjab was there before Pakistan. And so that's how I identified. That's where my people are from. So they're Punjabi, Pakistani. I think Amritpal Singh was asked the same question. He's like, Punjab is in Pakistan too. Then like, why don't you say you're Pakistani? He's like, but that's exactly the issue, is that Punjab was there before the partition. Therefore, I identify with that. And identifying as one or the other is acknowledging occupation.
Thank you, and thank you to all three of you. Like, great presentation. Thank you, Harshdeep, for getting us all here. But yeah, I don't know who else.
ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ you hear me? ਠੀਕ ਹੈ
It's just for the thing. We can hear you. You guys speak loud.
ਓਕੇ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਤਿੰਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤਿੰਨੋਂ ਹੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਸਪੀਰੇਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਪੀਕਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਰਨੀ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਸੰਗਤ ਤਾਂ ਚਲੋ ਜਿੰਨੀ ਆਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਬਹੁਤ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਦਾ 1.25 ਲੱਖ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਮੇਬੀ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਟਾਈਮ ਵੀ ਕੈਨ ਰੈਲੀ ਮੋਰ ਪੀਪਲ ਐਂਡ ਅਗਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਹਿਣੀ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਏਦਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਕਿਤੇ ਇਫ ਵੀ ਅਰੇਂਜ ਫॉर ਸਮਥਿੰਗ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅਗਲੀ ਜਨਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਉਹਨੇ ਇੰਸਪੀਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲੈਣੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੋਲੀਏ ਨਾ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੋਲੇ ਜਾਣਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਾ ਉਸ এনवायरमेंट ਚ ਪੜ੍ਹੇ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੇਸਿਕਲੀ ਇਹ ਬੋਲਣਾ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਸਿੱਖ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖੋਗੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਬੁੜਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਕੁਝ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਪਰ ਜਿੱਧਰ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੌਮ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਧਰ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਆ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਸਿਖਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕੇ ਜਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਿਖਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਹੋ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਹੈ ਪਰ ਜਿਸ ਬੇਸਿਕਲੀ ਮੇਰਾ ਕਹਿਣ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਮਝਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲ ਆ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੇ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰੀਏ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਸਕਦੇ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਾ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਜੂਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਕੈਂਪ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਵੀ ਲੱਗਣੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਤਿੰਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਔਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ਰਸ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ
I also want to thank you guys. It was very inspirational. And I have 2 daughters, so I'm just going to ask a question as a mom. Sometimes we're divided as a parent because we fear, right? We fear for them and they are vociferous, which is like you see in our Gurdwara. They do have the luxury of free thought. They get to speak. But sometimes we go back to Punjab and they're not, right? They don't believe in Khalistan. So sometimes I see the conflicts they have with their cousins. Like, what are you talking about? We don't believe in that here, right? So where is that way of, like, I need help to how to help them in this process of thinking. So sometimes that fear comes in the youth. Like, we don't want trouble. We don't want to be banned. We want to go visit our Gurdwara. We want to visit all of, Udasi, Kanyasi, like where our gurus came from. So we want that luxury of going back. But then that fear of ban, of speaking. So how do you come to, it's for all of you. So I'm just, as a mom, I'm speaking and like, what would you help me with that?
That's a good question. And it's something that I've discussed with numerous occasions because several articles that I have published have been flagged. And I was also signed on to a letter and I'm not sure if folks remember there was a letter written, or there was a report that was released by, I think it was the Mackenzie Institute out of Canada. I have this messed up. It was about 3-4 years ago, they released a report saying that everything that happened in '84 was out of what was done through Pakistan and it was a Pakistan project. And a few
Hudson Institute.
Hudson Institute. And a few scholars, Sikh scholars, have wrote a letter saying that as an institute you should be unbiased and report both sides. And within a week, Z News or ZTV picked it up and saying everyone who signed on to the letter are Pakistani agents, including, and my name was on there. And I wasn't informed of. Actually, my cousin sent me a screenshot of the report and saying, good luck going to India now. And they said it as a joke, and it's something that my family has also discussed like this, where you shouldn't be speaking too much. You should be careful about what you write. But I mean, for me, at the end of the day, it is. I would love to go back to Punjab and visit this. I mean, our history is there. Our entire livelihoods is from Punjab, despite me being born here. Unfortunately, my parents don't want me to take that risk, and there was a part of me that wanted to visit Pakistan as well. But they said if you visit Pakistan before you visit India, then for sure they're gonna say, "See, we told you he's a Pakistani agent." So for me, I mean, I've never. My parents always had that fear, and my grandparents had that fear. More specifically, my grandbrothers. And for me, I always just kind of put that to the side. And at the end of the day, I mean, if the those shaheeds had that fear as well. And I think I really just look up to them as inspiration. And I know it's hard to kind of say that, cholo koi na. But at the end of the day, if we want to fight for a sovereign state and we do want to fight against what's happening in our community, there are sacrifices that need to be made. And if we silence ourselves out of the desire to go back to India, out of the desire to go and not be labeled as a Khalistani, who will do this work then?
I'll say, you mentioned in the beginning that when they go back to Punjab and they talk to their cousins that they have disagreements. I think anytime that you speak about an issue where you disagree, having a debate on it will almost make you dig your heels further in and ground yourself more in what you already believe. So I think the correct way to approach it is kind of, you believe what you believe, we'll believe what we'll believe. And however, keep talking about the truth. Pose questions. Say, why are all these, why can't we speak in India? Are we telling anyone to blow up a building, or are we just talking about facts? Why are our voices silenced? I think posing questions and letting people come to their own conclusions is much more powerful, as opposed to saying, I believe this, you should believe it too, which is the typical format of a debate. So I think avoiding that is very key. As for the fear aspect, there's always going to be, this is a tactic of India, and India, arrested and tortured and still has Jaggi for this exact reason, is they want to set an example for the rest of the youth. And to an extent, they'll succeed, but they'll never completely succeed, because then you see Tejpaul Singh and all these folks coming in back into Punjab and putting it all back on the line. And that's where it really ends, is you will never be able to completely eliminate it. When Tejpaul Singh is free, even when Sant Janel Singh was there, all kinds of people are kind of rallying around them. But when it comes down to it, those people disappear. Even in Guru Gobind Singh Ji's time, when you talk about when he left Anandpur Sahib, just years earlier, there was thousands of people that took Amrit. But when he left Anandpur Sahib, there was only 40 left. So this is the constant thing, is we never really need to rally the majority. You need to have the clarity yourself, and you need to keep pushing forward. And the concept of Savalak is, whether I am alone or whether there's an entire army behind me supporting me, since I am fighting for the truth, I have that clarity. And at the end of the road may be death. That's a risk that my gurus have made. That's a risk that my gurus have took. That's a risk that my ancestors have taken. And that's a risk that I'll take as well. So that is hopefully the path that we can walk.
I'll offer a simple solution, in that education and conversation are your biggest friends. Conversations are the privileges of free thinkers. And so is education, by the way. Education teaches us how to really think. And so using these avenues, telling your daughters the information that these two things have shared with you, the education that they have shared with you, the problems that are relevant to Punjab, educating your daughters in that way, giving them and supporting them and giving them the ability to express themselves and articulate themselves in this free way. These are your methods of having them know what their state in the Bant is, what their state in the nation is, what their state in the world is. And if somebody can't converse with them, well, they're not as free as they may think.
All right, any other questions? All right, well, I'm going to invite Raj to the front. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Apologies for the delay in the end. But again, we want to thank you all for coming. We want to thank our speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules for joining us today. And we want to thank Ohlone College for giving us a space to host this event, the Lytton Center for funding, CSY for helping us with promotion. This event, along with Harman Benji's event 2 weeks ago, is, I'd like to say, just a trailer of what's to come. Raj and I are going to work closely to continue to receive funding, whether from the Lytton Center, but we're also going to expand, try to create Ohlone College is a space for, I guess, as Jujhar put it, open thought, free thought here at Ohlone College. So thank you all again. You want to say anything?
Thank you once again for coming. And then also, if you want to go ahead, there is a table in the back, and there are journals from Angkor, as well as I'm not from India, but I'm from Punjab, sweatshirts. If you guys want to go and purchase those, you can as well. Once again, thank you for coming out, and really appreciate having our community out here, and hopefully we'll continue to grow.
And we have Tejpaul Singh's books in the front. Thank you all again. Feel free to network. But yeah, thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.